Welcome to the See Me, Be Me podcast. I'm Nile Henry.
And I'm Blair Henry.
And we're two brothers who set out on a mission to make motorsport and STEM careers more diverse, affordable, and inclusive. We are the founders of the Blair Project.
This podcast series delves into the minds of inspirational individuals who come from ordinary and often humble backgrounds, but through their belief, dogged determination, and never give up attitude, have managed to overcome academic, social, or mental challenges to achieve their dream careers.
Our guests will share their life lessons that you too can apply to your own. We hope their stories will inspire you to go further, aim higher, and accept nothing less than you deserve. Your ambition, your purpose is all within, and we're here to help you unlock it. The planet of possibilities are endless.
You know who made it.
Hello and welcome to the See Me, Be Me podcast. Today we are joined by a very special guest and a familiar face to the Blair Project and to me and Blair. Today we have Amarron Frederick, who happens to be our brother, but has got an amazing background. So welcome to the podcast, Amarron.
Oh, thank you very much, Nile. And obviously, it's great to finally get the opportunity to appear on it. I mean, I've been sat quietly waiting for the invitation. And you know what? I'm unashamed to say that I had to give the nudge and a prompt to say, how come I've not been invited yet? So, no, great to finally get on here.
But we made it happen at the end of the day. You're finally on. It might have took a long while.
Better late than never is how the cliche goes, right?
Yeah. So, Amarron, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and what is it that you actually do?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, so I'll probably start off with what I do now, and then I'll probably just cover kind of my background and how I got here very briefly. So, at this moment in time, my title is a lending director. And I work for a new startup SME bank. So effectively, what my role is I look for and source opportunities with SME businesses who are looking for funding for their expansion and growth. So typically that'll be around purchasing new trading premises, maybe to go and acquire another business or anything that's geared up towards the future growth of the company.
Yeah.
My role is effectively liaising with that company, putting together the financial analysis, structuring a transaction that works for the bank and also the business, and then obviously taking that right through the process to the point where funds land in the customer's account. I'll touch onto the background now.
Yeah. Touch onto the background. How did you end up working in the banking sector?
Yeah, so if I'm going to be really honest, it kind of happened by chance, really. You know, I went to university, finished university. At that point in my life, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, if I'm going to be quite honest with you. And it just so happened, and I'll always remember the day that I heard there was an advert on one of the radio stations that I was listening to, and it was for one of the larger banks, not only in the UK but globally. And they happened to be opening a growth centre up in Manchester, which is where I'm from. And we're looking for people to join the business, and it was very much geared towards young people, and basically they were willing to train people up and give them the requisite skills to operate within the finance industry. So if I'm going to be honest, it was something that I kind of took a punt on. I was lucky enough to be invited for an interview. What was really nice about that process actually was that I didn't actually get the job that I initially applied for.
Yeah.
So I went through the interview. The interview went really well, but the feedback I got was that I came across really well, but they just had some concerns in terms of whether that role was the kind of best fit for me. And at the time when you get those kind of calls, you always kind of think, oh well, that's just them kind of letting you down gently and nicely, right? But they did make a point of saying that they'd keep my name on the roster and let me know if any kind of appropriate opportunities came up. And true to the words, two weeks later, I was invited back for another interview for a role which they felt much fitted my profile much better. Had a fantastic second interview with what was then the hiring manager, and was lucky enough to kind of get in at that time. And as I say, that for me was really, I suppose, gave me the foundation, both from a perspective of giving me an insight into financial services and operating within the sector, and also great from a development perspective in that it was 3 years whereby I kind of started with let's say a knowledge base of zero, and really allowed me to kind of build on on that knowledge base. And I think for me, the best takeaway I probably took from that period was that it actually made me aware that I do actually have a genuine interest in and somewhat of a passion for financial services and this financial services industry. I think one of the most empowering things was, and I'm sure we've all done it, where we've watched the news and we've kind of seen the finance section and they talk about all this great terminology and what's going on with the economy and interest rates, etc. And it was great to actually have a job which actually allowed me to kind of piece all that information together and actually understand exactly what they're talking about. And as I say, that really kind of opened the door to financial services for me and really piqued my interest. And then since then, really, I've kind of just navigated my way through the industry. So I always had an aspiration to ultimately be a relationship director. And a relationship director basically manages a portfolio of the bank's clients, business clients, and effectively is the face of the bank to that portfolio of clients. So that was always my career aspiration. So, as I say, that first initial job kind of set me off on that career path.
And what were some of the key challenges you faced going into career within banking, Amarron?
Good question. As I say, the initial challenge, I suppose, is like anything when you're kind of starting out on a journey. And as I said before, I kind of had a knowledge base of, let's say, zero. So I think initially it was kind of building up that knowledge base, understanding all the terminology and all the things that you kind of have to consider when working within the financial services industry. I say a challenge, but maybe also a benefit in some sense as well, in terms of, so I suppose, as I say, I had the career aspiration to be a relationship director, and I suppose a benefit or one of the advantages is that it's quite a linear career path. So you kind of have natural steps or next roles which you needed to kind of do to then ultimately be a relationship director. So I suppose that was a benefit in terms of, I had a very defined path which I knew I'd need to take in order to kind of achieve that aspiration. But I suppose the main challenge was just trying to get to that level, and naturally, I think it goes without saying in terms of, I think traditionally within my industry and stuff, I suppose it's not one whereby, you necessarily associate ethnic minorities with operating within the finance services industry. And I know there were certain times where I reflected within my career whereby, you kind of take a step back and I thought to myself, right, well, how many people look like me are doing the job that I want to do, right? And to be fair, I do remember it, and at this point, I did work in one of the top four kind of UK banks, and at this point in time, I do remember looking around, and I think there was only two people that kind of looked like me and were doing the job which I ultimately aspired to do. So naturally, when you're kind of in that scenario, I consider myself a really bullish and confident person, but naturally, there is always an element of self-doubt just in terms of, right, well, do people that look like me actually do these roles? Do you know what I mean? And win these jobs. One of the things that I always like to do in those kind of scenarios, I always kind of like to use challenges as a motivating factor. So whilst I didn't look round, whilst I looked around and didn't see too many people that looked like me doing the job, I wanted to kind of almost be that trailblazer and someone that kind of broke the mold. So whilst that was a challenge, I very much kind of used it to motivate myself and really drive. And if nothing else, it really kind of cemented that ambition that I had to actually get to that position and do the role.
Very, very, very interested in what you've just said, because your journey quite matches the similar journey that me and Blair have been on. Let's say with engineering, it's not the most diverse industry, and me and Blair have had to stick our necks out almost to say that, this is an industry that Black and Asian young people, even older generation, can get involved in. And we are the role models to inspire that next generation to come through in the industry. And that's just what you just said is what you're doing within banking. You didn't see too many people around you that look like you, and you said, what, I'm going to be the trailblazer. I'm going to be the role model, so that the people next coming through can see somebody like yourself and then think, wow, if Mari can do it, I can do it too. And an interesting thing that you did say is that, within I think it was the first year or two, you said that, what, my goal is to be a relationship director. And when it comes to goals and motivation, where did that stem from? I've always known you as a driven, ambitious dude, but where do you think that actually came from?
And I'm happy to be really honest, if I'm going to be honest. I mean, I think some of it was probably tinged with a little bit of ego, generally speaking, and in the kind of, kind of line of business that I've worked in within banking,
Yeah.
relationship director is probably seen as being one of the kind of top and maybe most prestigious roles. Because I mean, if you think about it, the bank is kind of invested in yourself and willing to put you forward as being one of their faces to the external market. And again, a little bit of that was probably also just driven by kind of things that I'd seen in films and movies and stuff as well. There's probably that perception of, a kind of a banker who's just out there kind of smoozing, whining and dining and engaging with clients and I suppose probably living the good life, so to speak. So I think
Yeah.
that might have been the perception that I had from the outside looking in. I mean, I think the reality is once you're in the role is that, there's not as much of that as you might expect. And
Yeah.
things certainly did change, obviously, post the kind of financial crash of 2007 and 2008. But yeah, so a lot of it was just driven by the fact that, I obviously wanted to kind of, as we've said and as I've said, that I've always been an ambitious individual and really wanted to climb to what I saw as kind of being the top of the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of it just driven by films like famous banking films like Wall Street and then later maybe Wolf of Wall Street and
Yeah.
The Big Short and other kind of ones. And I always just really wanted to kind of be fully invested in banking, right? So be that guy that's doing banking deals, that is able to kind of spout all that terminology, which we've all seen on news reports and films and stuff, and probably wondered, right, what does that
Yeah.
actually mean? I always wanted to be that guy. So I think that was what really was the main driver behind me identifying relationship director being that role, which I wanted to get.
And Maureen, just going through from the beginning of your career within banking, you were mentioning that there's not many people from like diverse backgrounds, particularly like black backgrounds, going into careers, particularly in finance. So when you were getting started, did you have a mentor or a coach who was guiding you on your way up the ladder in the corporate banking ladder?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think, and for me, I kind of think, for anyone who kind of really does have serious aspirations around wanting to do something, for me, I'm a big advocate of having mentors. So interestingly enough, I kind of approached it, or my approach to getting a mentor did evolve over a couple of years.
Yeah.
So initially, when I kind of started out on my banking journey, I was in Manchester, and then I then went to London for a period, and I genuinely think that anyone who is serious about finance and financial services, there's no getting away from the fact that London is a massive global hub of finance.
Yeah.
So I spent a couple of years down there, and whilst I was down there, and as I say, I kind of had that clear career goal. I very much did proactively seek out mentors, which I felt could help and guide me along that journey.
Yeah.
Now, on reflection, I suppose where I probably I wouldn't necessarily say went wrong, but where I kind of amended my approach is because whilst I was in London, I actually had some really senior mentors. And when I say senior, I'm talking like the MD of the whole kind of global multinational business,
Yeah.
um, the head of our global corporates Africa business as well. And whilst that was great from let's say, almost a personal PR perspective in terms of like getting my names on these guys' radar and them knowing who I am and what I
Yeah.
aspire to be. Um, One of the things that I became aware of, maybe a year into having a mentor relationship with them, is I suppose they were maybe that far removed from the day to day kind of what the role I want to do it entails and kind of what is actually going on at, let's say, what we call it on the front line. That I realized whilst it was great to have them and be able to kind of lean on them for advice, etc., I found that the advice was maybe a little bit more generic in terms of, right, well, overall this is what you had to do, but I probably didn't come out of those sessions with any kind of clear actions or clear kind of path, I suppose.
Yeah.
And again, maybe that was also down to myself in terms of, being new to a whole mentor relationship and maybe not driving it as proactive, those sessions as proactively as I might have done. However, I then came back to move back up to Manchester, and as I say, I'd spent close to 5 years in London. You form working relationships with people, and obviously all of the people that knew what I was about and how I work were based in London. So coming up to Manchester, it was then a case of working with a whole new network of internal network of people, and I very quickly realised that, right, well, what, firstly I need to kind of again get my name on people's radars up in Manchester, but also actually what I wanted to do was get a mentor that was actually doing the job that I aspired to do, so who was actually a relationship director.
Yeah.
So when I came up to Manchester, I actually kind of then, in my mind, actually kind of came up with what I think is a really good kind of differentiation in terms of the type of mentors that I had. So I've always typically had two mentors, and when I came to Manchester, again, I had two mentors. But one was the MD of the whole business up in the Northwest, which again kind of fitted the mold of the mentors which I had in London previously. And then I had another mentor, which was actually a relationship director, so who was actually doing the role that I aspired to do. Now, the way I differentiate between the two now is that the mentor, which was the MD of the business, I kind of saw him more as a career sponsor, stroke career advocate. So
Yeah.
someone who absolutely bought into myself and could effectively vouch for me, right? So anytime I was going for a role or a promotion or whatever, I had this person who could vouch for me to say that, look, they've been working with me on kind of personal development for a year and could absolutely vouch that, you know what, I'm a person with the right attitude and the capacity to learn new skills, etc. Whereas with my actual mentor, who was a relationship director, they were more. That was more a relationship whereby, you know what, I was very much looking to kind of tread the path that they had already trodden.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
case of, right, well, you want to be a relationship director. Here's what I had to do on my journey. Here's the skills that you're going to need to develop in order to be a relationship director. And here's how I see you doing those. And I think the difference in approach that I took to both those two mentors was actually I realized that in a mentor mentee relationship, I think the onus is on the mentee, right, to actually proactively drive those sessions and get out of
Yeah.
it what you want to
Yeah.
achieve. So one of the things that I came up with was kind of a self-assessment skills audit. So it was a case of looking at, right, well, in terms of the skill levels or the skills that I need to be a relationship director, where
Yeah.
am I on a scale of 1 to 5? So I kind of did that self-assessment then,
Wow.
and then really the purpose of my sessions then was, right, well, how do we move anything that you at maybe a 1 or a 2 on? How do we move that to a 4 or a 5, right, to give you the best chance of them being a relationship director? And I found just kind of having that approach. Then every session we kind of had clear actions, clear things that I was going to go away and do. We had a timeline in place, so all the actions was going to be done by the next session, which again we kept in the diary regularly for every 6 weeks. And I just found that whole process was really useful for one, allowing me to develop those skills that I really needed to. And when you're a lot younger and you're really kind of thirsty and ambitious, you always kind of are eager and just want to get into that role now, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of think, no, I can do this, and if someone just gives me the chance. It's only now that when I have done the roles and done them for subsequently for a number of years, when I look back and reflect, I think all the advice that I was given at that time was absolutely right. And that the
Yeah.
reality is that I didn't have the skill set at the time, and absolutely needed to develop them. And I'm always thankful for having been on that development journey, because it just allowed me to actually succeed once I kind of got into the roles that I aspired to do. And I do genuinely think it would have been a massive challenge if I hadn't developed that skill set.
So Marin, two questions. One related to your current role right now. For the audience listening at home, what three unique skills must you have to be able to be successful at being a lending director right now?
Yeah, so I think, look, I think it goes without saying that, I suppose there's a technical aspect to my roles in terms of doing financial and credit analysis. So
Yeah.
yeah, naturally you do have to kind of understand or be able to pick up a set of accounts, business accounts, and be able to kind of go through them, understand what's going on with those accounts, then understand what does that tell you about the business, how it operates, and the journey to date. Because I always remember, and again, as part of my development journey, one piece of advice I was given is that, you know what, the financial accounts will always tell you a story about the
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And my job is effectively really to match up the story that the accounts are telling me with the story that the business owner is telling me as well, right? Because in most cases, the story that the business owner tells you, you should be able to then see in the accounts, right? Because the numbers tell the story. So
Yeah.
there is that. So number one, I'd say the technical skills around financial analysis. Number two, a lot of my role is networking, being comfortable engaging with people.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, and I do like to think that that's probably one of my strengths, and I think sometimes when that kind of skill is your strength, you maybe don't value it as much and almost kind of just take it as something that everyone can do, and actually it's not a skill, but I absolutely do think it is. And as I say, I think that's one of my strengths. And to give a bit of context, in my type of role, I will be out at networking events or business events. You're meeting business owners, and as we're all aware, there's a number of banks in the market, there's a number of funders as well. I mean, on the last set of research I've seen, I think there's about 250 kind of funders in the UK market, right? So all looking for opportunities, all looking to fund businesses. So I suppose one of my strengths and one of the key skills I think you need is actually being able to kind of build that, not an instant rapport, but be able to build a rapport with someone that you've met for the
Yeah.
first time and build that rapport relatively quickly, right? So I think that's probably the second key skill. And I think the third one that I would say, and I think this is probably true of the majority of industries and the majority of jobs that people go into, is resilience. Because I think,
Yeah.
you know what, the reality is that you're not going to win every deal that you look to do. A lot of the time you'll do a lot of the work around the financial analysis and doing your application paper and all that kind of thing. And sometimes you don't get the approval that you're looking for, and sometimes you sit back and think, well, no, I think this is a really good deal, but ultimately someone else doesn't. Okay, you have to take that on the chin. Sometimes you'll get an approval, and ultimately, you know what, the potential customer or client gets a better offer from another bank or another funder, and therefore you don't lose the deal. Again, having had to do a lot of the work up front for no gain. And sometimes it is just a case of, you know what, it can be a really challenging role. I mean, I know for a fact yourselves, as you described now before we opened, that you were working through the night in order to meet a deadline. And the same is true of my role, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes you'll get periods whereby, you know what, you will be working like literally a whole day from 9 a.m, you know, for right through to maybe 10, 11, 12 at night. So it's very much not one of these roles that starts at 9, finishes at 5, and
Yeah.
this is what I do. And if it doesn't fit within my role profile, so you have to speak to someone else. It's my job to get things done, right? So whether that means, as I say, yeah, working through the night, whether that means actually having to learn something new, that actually doesn't sit within my role profile. But actually, if I want to get a deal done, then I'm going to need to kind of, you know, provide a view on this. So I think, you know what, you do need an element of resilience in order to kind of, you know, operate like that. I mean, I do remember it was only a couple of weeks ago where I was working on a deal. I got a call from the customer maybe about 9 o'clock at night, where something had changed with the deal, but this was on a Thursday and the deal needed to be completed on the Friday. And I remember I had to phone one of my colleagues, literally this was about 11 o'clock at night, and just say, look, really sorry for calling you so late, but I need to kind of get a handle on this because we need this deal to complete the next day. And suffice to say, we did it. We got it all completed. And I mean, even the customer kind of thought, you know, the customer actually made a point of saying to me, I actually thought I was going to get a phone call off you at 5 o'clock on the Friday to say, really sorry, it's not been done. But suffice to say, we got it done and it exceeded expectations. And again, that was just from one hand of having that resilience, and two, just that you know, that mindset in terms of what this needs to get done, and I want to get it done. So let's get it done. Do you know what I mean?
No, brilliant. And I absolutely love that. And you know, it's been one of the things that a lot of our guests I've spoke about on the podcast, that you do need resilience in any sort of career. It's that whole thing of, you know, never giving up. You know, just because you
Yeah.
got knocked back at the first hurdle doesn't mean you'll get knocked back at the second hurdle, and just keep going because you will get there eventually.
Absolutely, because I think a lot of the time, and sometimes I even do it myself, you know, when you kind of come across people who are successful, and you kind of
Yeah.
think, wow, wouldn't it be great to be in their position? And I want to do that X, Y, Z. But what people don't always appreciate or have a window into is actually the challenges and the knockbacks that they've probably faced on that journey to get where they are now today, right? So I think everyone's journey, you have challenges and you get
Yeah.
knockbacks, and I think it is just about not letting those become a barrier to your success.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Maren, I want to kind of take it back a bit and go back to the early childhood, because obviously we grew up with you. We had a really great childhood. I mean, most of the time it was spent you doing wrestling moves on us on the bed, choke slams, rock bottoms, all that. We used to be big WWF fans in the
I
household.
think that's where I
But
built your resilience. I think.
no doubt, no doubt. And I came back fighting stronger. But what most people don't know is that you came from a sporting background and you made it to an academy of one of the, well, they were a Premier League club up until last season. So do you want to tell our audience a bit about your background growing up and the football days?
Yeah, and you know that's probably really succinct actually, because obviously
Mm.
off the back of our conversation around resilience, because I do think it was my time spent at the academy which really kind of built my resilience. So yeah, so for the wider audience, so I was on the books at Leeds United. This is many years ago now, and I'm not going to say how many years ago, but as you said, it was
Mm.
when they were a high flying Premier League team. So say I was lucky enough to be invited to sign for Leeds United, and as part of me signing, I actually moved to their kind of accommodation up in Leeds at the age of 13. So that, as you can imagine, that involved leaving home, going to
Yeah.
stay in what they call a digs, but it's effectively akin to like a student hall of residence, right? Whereby that was myself and what 10 other guys who all played for Leeds, and we went to school during the daytime, trained in the evening, and we had I'm trying to think of the right terminology. Basically, it was almost like a living surrogate mum, right? So we had a woman, and her name was Kath, and she used to basically do our washing and cook the food, but then we had to do everything else, right? So that's ironing your clothes, making your bed,
Mm.
all that stuff that at the age of 13 you just have no no, you just never contemplate that these are the things that you have to do in real life. And I say, so kind of touching back on that resilience piece, because fundamentally, I mean, I had a really great time there, living with like 9 other lads all around about my age. I mean, you can
Wow.
probably imagine all the kind of stuff that went on, and the camaraderie that we built up, and just the fun that we had. But whilst these people became great friends, and and continue to be great friends, the reality is that we were all competing against each other. All had aspirations to want to get into the first team,
Yeah.
and naturally you understand that there's only ever so many positions in a team, and the percentages of people that actually make it in football are really low. So it wasn't lost on us in terms of, right, well, we are all friends, but we are all competing as well. And I think, as I say, going back to that kind of how it helped me to build resilience, because I mean, one, there was that living away from home at really early age. So you know
Yeah.
what, you've naturally not got that proximity to your family as you would ordinarily have through living at home. I think with football as well, it's one of those sports whereby when you're in form and you're playing well, it's great and it's fantastic and you feel on top of the world. Conversely, when you know that you're not playing well, and you just can't find that form, it can be like a really lonely place to be. Again, especially when you are living on your own, and you're living with other lads who, again, some of them might be in great form, and you know what, literally kind of taking your shine, so to speak.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then, I mean, I suppose ultimately I got let go at the age of 16, and again, naturally, there was a big element of disappointment in that, because I suppose
Mm.
for the 4 years prior to that, I always kind of envisioned myself as ultimately being a footballer, and never really looked at anything past that. When I was released, it was a case of I kind of then moved back home, and it was almost like coming back to reality, so to speak. Because
Yeah.
when I reflect on it, I'd probably been living in a bubble for 3 or 4 years, whereby, as I say, the reality is that everything was taken care of for you. You had a bus which picked you up in the morning, took you to school, brought you back to the training ground. We then had a tutor who helped us with our homework. We then training. All of our meals were cooked and prepared. We even got a
Yeah.
little bit of spending money as well. So do you know what I mean? So literally everything in life that a normal person might have to consider and factor into their lives, we didn't. But then I had to then kind of come back and kind of reintegrate into what I'd call normal life. But as I say, I mean, I think as part of that journey, I mean, yeah, there's naturally, as I said, there were disappointments along that journey, but I think that we did really build up that resilience, and just build up that mindset of being able to take disappointments, not
Yeah.
getting hung up on them, and then literally moving on to the next thing, and picking yourself up, dusting yourself off, and going again.
Now that we're on the topic of you growing up, Marin, who would you say some of your biggest role models were growing up?
Good question. So I think from a footballing perspective, and at the time it was Rio Ferdinand, because I was a defender when I was at Leeds, and Rio joined. Funny enough, joined Leeds United as well, and at the time he was probably held up as being probably the best defender in
Yeah.
the UK at the time. I always just really enjoyed the fact that he was a great defender, but he was also good on the ball as well, which at that time a lot of kind of defenders were kind of the old traditional kind of head it, kick it, get it upfield kind of centre backs, whereas Rio was one of the first ones that could actually play with the ball, and was really good.
Yeah.
So I always kind of had Rio Ferdinand as a role model. And then there was also Will Smith as well, which I
Oh.
know at this point in time might sound a bit controversial to say, but there was a point in time when Will Smith was kind of what I kind of view as being a really well-rounded role model.
Mm.
Because I always remember when I was growing up, a lot of kind of black role models at the time were kind of either athletes or musicians really, and
Yeah.
some being actors. Um, and the thing that I really enjoyed about Will Smith is that for me, he always kind of broke the role in terms of, or broke the mold, sorry, in terms of being so a lot of music and music artists, it would be rap or R&B, and we all know they all contain profanities and swear words and what you say is coarse language. Whereas Will Smith in a lot of his music and stuff, he never used to use swear words. They were generally
Yeah.
always kind of about a positive theme and stuff, which I really liked at the time. And I think the same is probably true about his acting, right? From kind of Fresh Prince of Bel Air, which I'm sure literally probably 90% of the population know the theme song to Fresh
Yeah.
Prince of Bel Air, right? And then later went on to do movies and films, but they were all kind of generally kind of about positive things or just generally kind of mainstream stuff. So
Yeah.
I always
Yeah.
kind of enjoyed having Will Smith as a role model as well.
And just bringing it back to where you are today as a lending director, because you work with SMEs with funding for growth and expansion. But what would you say are some of the key challenges for small and medium enterprises to grow and innovate?
Yeah, so I think firstly, um, is maybe just understanding the market for finance in terms of, I think a lot of people's maybe first point of call is their existing bank, and then maybe the other traditional kind of 4 or 5 high street banks, which
Yeah.
I suppose is a natural assumption, right? Because a lot of people think, right, well, I want to lend money, I go to a bank. But actually, there is a whole kind of market of what we call maybe second tier funders, who
Yeah.
some of which are smaller banks, some of which are literally just organizations which are set up to lend money. So I think, just the understanding of the market, of recognizing, right, well, there are loads of different funders in the market. All of them have slightly different risk appetites.
Yeah.
And just because a bank has said no doesn't mean that you're not a fundable proposition, right? You just have to find the right person to fund you, right? And I think, secondly, and probably off the back of that, is probably just the terminology and language that we use in banking, right? So I think one of the challenges, and I suppose one of the roles that I play, right, when I meet business owners, in terms of what I find about especially SME business owners, is that, are very good at telling you the journey they've been on, are generally really good at articulating what their business does, and to a certain extent telling you actually, well, the funding that they need. Okay. Whereas in banking and in finance, there's a certain language that we use, right? So I suppose my role, and I suppose it's a challenge that SMEs face, is right, actually translating what they need and what's going on with their business into language which finance individuals and bankers will actually understand, and then can actually use to kind of get a funding proposition away. and
Wow.
and, and you might think that that's probably a simple thing to do, or something that everyone should be capable of, in terms of
Yeah.
articulating, right, well, I need this money for X and Y. But as I said, there is just a certain language, certain terminology which we use in banking, which you need to kind of frame in the right way. And I think that's probably a challenge that faces a lot of SME business owners, is just translating what they need into a language which a funder can buy into.
As a lending director, Maren, what does an average day look like for you? What does the average day for Amarron Frederick look like?
I always like to think that, as a lending director, there's probably 3 points on a circular cycle, right? In terms of, you'll have a point whereby you're trying to get new deals that you're working on approved through your approval process.
Yeah.
The second point is trying to get those deals which you've already got approved kind of through the completion process, i.e., getting all the legal due diligence done and getting to the point whereby you can actually lend the money to the customer, right? I.e., put the money in the customer's account. And
Yeah.
then the third point in the cycle is actually business development, i.e., going out there and looking to win new business, looking for new deals, which you can then take through that approval process, and then back through the completion process, and then you're back to looking for new deals, etc. So that my day to day probably spans all three of those aspects. So typically, my day will normally always start with I'll probably have a couple of new deals on desk which I need to review, and if I think it's something that we would look to fund, then put
Yeah.
together a proposal around that. That's generally kind of what the start of my day looks like. Once we move on to the middle of the day, it will probably be a case of, doing work on some deals which have already got approved, and that might be liaising with solicitors to kind of around certain aspects of the deal, so making sure that everything is as it should be. Some of it might be also working with external parties as well, in terms of if there's a property which we're going to lend against, getting someone to do that valuation, reviewing the valuation, making sure that we're comfortable with the premises and the property which we're lending against. And as I said, there's then, I suppose, the end of my day is maybe more around business development. So that's around liaising with people in my network, making sure that you stay close to people as well, because a good portion of my network is what we call kind of finance brokers. So they're guys that really and truly are actually just fully focused on business development, right? So again, like me, they're going out there, looking for business owners, looking for deal opportunities. I suppose where their role differs slightly to mine is that for brokers, they will actually put together a funding proposal, and then we'll bring it to a number of funders like myself and say, right, I've got this potential deal. Is this something
Yeah.
that you'd be interested in? So
Oh.
naturally, having that relationship with brokers, you always want to make sure that you're probably one of the first people they think of, right, whenever they get opportunities. Because as I said, there's something like 250 funders in the UK market, right? So naturally, for the good brokers, I want to be one of maybe the top 3 people that they think of, right? So how do you do that? A lot of that is just through ongoing engagement, right? Because I suppose anyone can meet someone once. You can swap business cards with people, and then they've got your business card, and then you sit and hope that they think about you. Whereas
Yeah.
for me, I want to be that person that when they think, oh, I've got this deal, oh yeah, let me see if I want to be interested in that, right? Because we speak regularly. I tell them about deals that I've done, deals that I'm doing, to let them know that I'm active in the market and I am doing deals. And if you bring me something that is for us, then we will get the deal done. So yeah, so I'll probably say
That's
that's generally the kind of 3 prongs to my average day.
Mara, I've got 2 questions. How important do you believe that everybody should learn financial literacy? And then the second one, let's say we've got a driven college student, he or she is about to finish their A levels or BTEC, or there's a university graduate looking to seek their first job. What advice would you give to that driven individual, and what advice do you believe that they should ignore?
So in terms of the first question around financial literacy, absolutely. I'm a massive advocate of financial literacy, and as I alluded to, I think that was one of the most empowering things I found about working within the financial services industry, is just that it has made me financially literate, and that's both in my kind of professional capacity within my job, but also in a personal capacity as well, right? Understanding the dynamics between interest rates and the economy, and what all those potential impacts could have. To be honest, I think that was one of the things that really kind of gave me a passion for financial services and the whole industry. And that, look, everyone works with money in their life, right? Whether it's a case of you get a salary from your employment, from your job, and you budget how to make that salary last through the month. You decide what you're going to spend money on, what you're going to invest in, whether it's buy a house, buy a car, whatever it is. But whether people recognize it or not, finance plays a massive part in people's life, right? Understanding being
yeah.
able to manage cash, I think, is one of the key life skills that people need to have. um, and that comes in many guises, right? So how do you upskill yourself to be financially literate? I think with things like social media and YouTube now, there's a massive library of stuff out there which people can be proactive and use.
Yeah.
Likewise, there's a number of courses as well. And books as well, traditional books as well. I always try and make a point of, at least reading 2 books a year, around finance, and not necessarily just kind of financial analysis textbooks, but it might be anything. It might be someone's journey
Yeah.
through investments, or whatever the case may be. And then one of the ways that I really kind of upskilled or maybe tested my learning was just around watching the finance segments on news bulletins and and some of the big kind of kind of news channels as well. Um, if nothing else, just to kind of get used to hearing how terminology is used, where it's used, kind of in the context that it's used in. I found that as a really good barometer for myself. To move on to your second question, then, in terms of someone that's either kind of leaving school, college, or university, and that would be interested in getting in finance or a job in financial services. I mean, I think one of the really good mechanisms that I've kind of seen firsthand is doing internships. So I know at places where I've worked previously, we used to kind of have an internship program whereby during typically like the summer months, maybe on the school and the university holidays, whereby we would get a raft of interns in. Um, I think the benefits of that is twofold. I think
Yeah.
one from that person's perspective, it gives them a really good kind of initial insight into what does working within financial services actually look like. As I alluded to at the start, I mean, I always had this perception of wanting to be a banker and a relationship director, and kind of saw it as a sleek and sexy type role, which you kind of think, oh, I'll be out there all day, kind of, having business lunches, dinners, and this kind of a thing, which I suppose there is an element of in business development, but actually, that's probably 10% of the role. The other 90% of the role is kind of, at the laptop, doing financial analysis, writing reports, writing papers, all that kind of thing. So there's certainly that element to it. And I think from the bank's perspective, and I've seen this work really well in terms of for interns that come in and do a really good role, it gives the bank first access to that talent. And I've seen loads of interns subsequently offered permanent jobs. And those permanent jobs haven't necessarily been, oh yeah, come and start tomorrow. Those permanent jobs have sometimes been, right, well, when you complete your studies in a year's time or whatever it may be, we would love to have you on board. So we're going to keep your name in a list of preferred candidates, and if it's something that appeals to you, then come and take the job. And I remember when I started out at one of the banks I worked for, I started out with someone who had been through that exact journey, whereby they had actually done an internship, were thought of really highly, and then they actually took the decision that they didn't want to subsequently go to university. They actually wanted to join the bank and work their way up the career ladder. I think I've seen that work really well, and I think if nothing else, in terms of advice that I could give anyone that wanted to kind of go on that career journey, and it's something that I had to learn myself as well when I've been trying to get promotions and applying for various jobs within the banks that I've worked for, is I can't emphasize enough the whole piece around networking and engagement, especially within my industry, and it might be true for a lot of other industries out there, is that generally people buy people, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, you can have all the skills and all the degrees and qualifications and everything that there is, but ultimately, you know what, anyone that's hiring someone wants to know that, one, that person can do the job, but two, will fit into the team and actually someone that they can work with, right, and has the right attitude and all that kind of thing. And one of the things that I always do whenever I'm going for a new role, whether it be internal or external, I always make sure that I book in a coffee chat or a meeting with the hiring manager outside of the whole interview process. Why? Just so that you can have a genuine down-to-earth talk. This is about me. This is what I'm about. This is what I'm looking for. Why I want to apply for the role. Tell me about the type of person that you're looking for. Do you think I would be a good fit? If not, what do you think I need to hone and develop in order to be a good fit? So I think making sure that you do engagement and trying not to just go into interviews cold. Now, I recognize it's not always possible to do that, but where possible, I think that's definitely a benefit.
And on another one, on the state of the current economy with inflation and cost of living, I think it was this time last year we were at, was it about 10.1 in inflation? And now I think we're down to about 6.8. Do you think it will ever get back to what it once was back in 2021, which I think it was at 2-3%? Or do you think it's probably going to be another year and a half until we're actually, in a much more stable position?
Yeah, look, really fair question, and you know what? I'm sure there's much smarter people than me who get paid a lot more that can give you a better insight than I can. I mean, what I would say is, do I think we'll ever return to what we maybe historically have viewed as normality? I mean, yes, I do think we will get there. I mean, I think it'll maybe take us a little bit longer to get there than than we maybe originally envisaged, but I do think ultimately we will get there. And I think a lot of that is driven by kind of market forces and dynamics, which sometimes kind of are maybe out of balance with each other. But I think one of the fundamentals of the market is that, you know what, they always generally at some point will kind of, you know what, balance, and you'll get to an ideal point of maybe equilibrium in terms of. And it's interesting enough, I was having this conversation with a potential customer only last week, because we were talking about a potential deal, and they were saying that one of the concerns they had is whether it'd be a good time to do the deal given where interest rates are, etc. I mean, my response to them was that, you know, ultimately, I do think we're pretty close to the peak of interest rates now, and fundamentally, if you can make something work now, then in my personal view, and again, this is my only personal view, is that, you know, interest rates will start to decrease over the next 12 to 18 months. And therefore, you know, if you can make something work in this environment, then as interest rates decrease, then it's only beneficial and an upside for yourself, right, as your costs of funding decrease as well. So I think, all right, it might be painful now, but hopefully it will just get easier and easier and easier as we go into a more normalized interest rate environment.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Now, Marn, we're on to the bonus section of the podcast, where we ask you 3 questions, 3 interesting questions. The first question that we ask our audience, I judge every single guest. And like I've reiterated in previous ones, if you do not give me the answer I asked for, we will be ending this podcast earlier, and you will see the remaining 2 questions.
Be gentle with me now. Be gentle.
Family love. I might let you off. So the first question, Lauren, and I don't think I've ever seen you eat this before, but does pineapple belong on a pizza?
Does pineapple belong on a pizza? Absolutely, 100% yes.
What?
Absolutely, 100% yes, it does. You know what? Ham and pineapple pizza was one of my favourite ones growing up as a kid. And actually, it's not always my go-to pizza now, but look, I am a big advocate of pineapple on a pizza. So I'm guessing from your face that was the wrong answer.
I never saw you growing up with Hawaiian pizza.
Well, maybe it was before your time. Maybe it was before your time, but no, I am an advocate of pineapple on a pizza.
No, it was when
I'm not going to lie. If I'm going to be completely honest, there was a period where I did go off it slightly, but I found maybe about 2-3 years ago, I had a ham and pineapple pizza, and I actually thought, oh my god, I've been missing out for all this time. So yeah, absolutely would advocate that.
Sacrilege. Oh my god. All right, that's the end. Right. Thanks everybody. Thanks for listening. Take it. No, I'm joking. You know what, Maren? I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Hey, now listen, we've been to many kind of all you can eat kind of meat and steak places, and you always finish with the grilled pineapple. So, so you're obviously not that adverse to pineapple, although it's not on a pizza. Yes, but
you take the pineapple off the pizza. You eat the pizza and finish with the pineapple. You do not mix and combine them both. That's just out of
the devil's in the detail. Then I suppose
the devil is in the detail. But you eat the pineapple afterwards for the digestion, to help with the digestion. You don't eat it on the pizza. Oh, and that's all. The next question, right? If you could host a dinner party tonight, and you had to invite 4 guests, dead or alive, who would you invite?
Oh man, that's a great question.
I know one's going to be Tupac, I think.
Yeah, so I think it would have to be Tupac Shakur would be one of them, because I think growing up he was one of my favorite artists. I'm going to say I was going to say Diego Maradona, but I think, you know what, I'll probably actually change that to Cristiano Ronaldo, just because he's a bit more current, and I just think, you know what, some of the achievements he's had in his career, you know what, it's almost fanciful. So I'm going to put Cristiano Ronaldo on there. I'll probably have is it Ruth Bader Ginsburg? I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she was kind of, you know, a civil rights activist in America, and was she rose to Supreme Court judge, and was very much an advocate of kind of women's and civil rights as well. But you know what, I remember watching her. I think it's a documentary on her life story. It might have been a film, but you know what I mean. She had to face some real challenges, and as much as we might think we face challenges as ethnic minorities, which we absolutely do, do. The same was true of Ruda Bath Ginsburg as well, just by virtue of being a female in the time that she kind of grew up and was working. So I would have her on there as well. So I've got one serious, one sport, and one music. So I think we're gonna need someone to kind of lighten the mood a little bit and add a bit of comedy value as well, aren't we? So it will probably be Russell Peters, who I know is one of your favourite comedians.
Yeah.
Now and I think I will probably just have Russell in there just for a bit of comedy value and to kind of make sure we lighten the mood in case we get into any serious topic and some discussion.
I think that might be the greatest dinner party. I think no one will get any food eaten. It'd just be bare laughs from start to finish.
Yeah,
maybe
a
a few deaths from heart attacks from the laughter as well. And then
No,
the last
cheers.
question. Yeah. and the last question is, if you could travel anywhere right now, where would you go?
So right now, I think it would be somewhere in South America, I couldn't necessarily say a particular country. I mean, again, growing up, being into football and quite immersed in the kind of whole football ecosystem, I always kind of had almost a penchant for Brazil, just by virtue of them being one of the most successful international team, and I don't think there's any getting away from those yellow shirts are pretty attractive, aren't they? And pretty nice. So I'd probably say out of anywhere it'd be South America, and if I had to pick a country, it'd be Brazil, purely because I think I've been to all the other continents, bar Australia, and the South America is probably next on my list of places to visit. So let's say Brazil.
I'd join you. I'd join you if it was for Carnival.
I was thinking. I mean, that was one point I was thinking about whether I'd want to go right now or wait till I think it's February, isn't it? Where Carnival is. It'd probably be February would be my preference.
Excellent. Well, Marin, thank you so much for being a guest on the See Me Be Me podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the experience. And lastly, for the viewers, if they want to follow you on your journey in terms of social media handles, websites, whatever, where can people follow you on your journey?
So the best place to probably follow me is LinkedIn, because I do a lot of kind of networking on there, and also quite a few posts just in terms of events that I'm at and potential deals that I'm looking at as well. So I think that's probably the best place to kind of follow me. And as always, very much happy for people to reach out, and if anyone wants to have kind of a discussion, or even if it's just more in-depth kind of guidance in terms of people who maybe aspire to do the same thing or just want some advice, then more than happy for people to reach out.
Excellent. This has been a really, really great episode, and I'm sure we'll see Amarron on a future episode down the line, and see what more exciting deals he's done since in the future.
I was just going to say, brilliant, and obviously thank you very much for inviting me on and for the opportunity to come and speak. I really enjoyed it as well.
Thanks again, Amarron.
Anytime. Apologies, it took so long, but we got there. We got there in the end.
No worries. Thank you anyway. You're back in my good books now. You're back in my good books.
Yeah. Thanks very much, guys. Enjoy the episode. Take care. Bye-bye.
So thank you again, guys, for listening to another episode of our See Me Be Me podcast. It was great to have Amarron on, not just because he's my older brother, but also just to hear his experiences in the world of corporate banking. And a little fun fact as well, Amarron was a key in terms of getting me my first job when I used to work in corporate banking a few years back. So he helped me get on that ladder into seeing the world of corporate banking for 2 years. So I've got to really thank him for that. So just a few of my the main takes that I'd like to just go through. And one of the most important aspects of what Amarron was talking about was essentially when he was going up the ladder for corporate banking, that importance of being that self-assessment essentially. So when he was mentioning when he had a mentor, that as the mentee, he was almost like trying to drive that forward for his own development. So he had a goal to get up the ranks in the world of corporate banking, to eventually get up to a relationship director. But all the things that he needed to learn, he had to just make sure that he understood those different dynamics before he was able to essentially get that role within corporate banking. And one of the things that he also stressed was the importance of networking. So just going out there and making yourself known and just speak to people about the opportunities that are out there, because a lot of the times when you're speaking with people, whether that's in the world of business or establishing like relationships and whatnot, opportunities will normally come if people like you, or should I say, take a liking to you. So it's almost with what Amarron was saying is you almost have to be willing to go outside of your comfort zone essentially and show people that you are better than the other people around you. It's like where he is now as a lending director, when he's trying to do business and whatnot with these different clients, he likes to be the person that everyone has in the back of their mind. Yeah, I just met about Amarron Frederick. He blew me away and whatnot. But that's really important, because at the end of the day, if you want to, you have to make sure that you stand out from the crowd, that you almost have like that it factor that people want to talk about. And that's how you essentially sell yourself to the wider market, where look at this guy, look what he's doing, look how confident he is. And that's essentially what will get people to invest in you, not even just in working in a job, but also if you're running and operating your own business. It's really important to just sell yourself in the right way and make sure that people, take a liking to you. And if you've got an idea, make sure that you sell yourself properly. And just in general, just to close off, Amarron is a big inspiration. I mean, it's like he was mentioning earlier that in the world of, let's say, finance and corporate banking, there's not a lot of black people, particularly in Greater Manchester, who are in the area of finance. So even when I was working with him in banking as well, we were probably two of the only black faces who were in the office. And for an area as diverse as Greater Manchester, it was quite eye-opening, to be honest. And just the fact that he's one of the, as you mentioned, one of the big trailblazers for showing what is possible for black people to achieve in the world of corporate banking is honestly, it's truly, and I'm not just saying it obviously because Amarron's my brother, but he's a true inspiration to myself and Nile, but not only to myself and Nile, but a lot of young black people around the country, and showing us essentially, or opening our eyes to the world of opportunity that's out there for black people in the corporate world. So thank you again for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can follow us on the Blair Project on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube at the Blair Project. Or if you want to follow us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, we are at Get Me Motoring. And just a final word for myself, podcasts will be shooting again next week. So make sure to keep watching our podcast weekly for our next inspiring guest or trailblazer in the world of science, technology, or business. My name is Blair Henry. And once again, thanks for listening, guys. Peace out.
If you've liked today's episode, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. The Blair Project is on all major social media platforms, including Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube at The Blair Project. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Yes, we are on TikTok at Get Me Motoring. If you'd like to follow myself individually, I am on Instagram at Nile Henry and also LinkedIn at Nile Henry as well.
And if you want to follow myself, I'm on Instagram as BlairHenry_97 and also on LinkedIn as just Blair Henry.
So we look forward to having you on the next episode. So stay tuned. Take care.
Until next time.